Hi, my friend. Welcome back to Woven English. Before we begin today, I want you to do something for me. Close your eyes for just a moment. Imagine you are walking down a long, narrow street. The stones beneath your feet are wet. The air smells of smoke and river water. It is a gray afternoon, and the year is somewhere around 1599. You can hear voices, loud voices, coming from across the river. And as you get closer, you see it. A large, round building. Open to the sky, people are pushing through the doors, laughing, arguing, buying food from sellers on the street. Inside, someone is about to speak lines that no one has ever heard before. Lines that will still be repeated 400 years from now. This is the Globe Theatre, and the man who wrote the words being spoken inside, he is somewhere in that building right now, watching, listening, thinking about the next story. His name is William Shakespeare. And today, on Woven English, we are going to walk through his life together. Slowly, carefully, the way we always do. But first, I want to ask you something. When was the last time you said the word lonely? Maybe yesterday. Maybe this morning. Maybe you felt it yourself recently and could not quite explain it to someone else. But here is a question almost no one thinks to ask. Who invented that word? Because lonely did not always exist. Someone had to create it. Someone had to look at a feeling that millions of people carried inside them, and find exactly the right sound, the right letters, the right shape to hold it. That person was Shakespeare. And lonely is just one word. He also gave us generous. He gave us bedroom. He gave us eyeball, uncomfortable, amazement, and fashionable. Over 1,700 words in total. Words you use every single week without ever knowing where they came from. So today, we are not just learning about a writer. We are learning about the man who helped build the language you are studying right now. Make yourself comfortable. Take a slow breath, and let us begin at the beginning. William Shakespeare was born in April of 1564 in a town called Stratford-upon-Avon. And the first thing you should know about this town is that it was quiet. Beautifully, completely quiet. There was a river, the River Avon, that moved slowly through the town like a long, silver thought. There were green fields on every side. The streets were narrow, the houses made of dark wood and white plaster. People here grew up knowing their neighbors. They knew the baker, the blacksmith, the man who fixed wagon wheels. It was a world of small things. And into this small world, a boy was born who would one day fill the entire world with words. His father, John Shakespeare, was a glove maker. He worked with leather, cutting it, shaping it, stitching it into something useful. It was honest, careful, quiet work. In some years, the family had enough money. In other years, they did not. His mother, Mary Arden, came from a family that owned land. She brought a kind of steadiness to the household, a quiet strength that held the family together. William was the third of 8 children. But here is something important to understand about the world he was born into. Children died, often, regularly, without warning. 2 of William's older sisters had already died before he came into the world. Disease was everywhere. Medicine could do very little. Life was fragile in a way we can hardly imagine today. And perhaps this is why, even as a very young boy, William understood something about time, about how quickly things change, about how a moment, once it passes, never comes back. You can hear this understanding in his writing, decades later. His words are full of the knowledge that nothing lasts forever. When he was old enough, William was sent to the local grammar school. Now, in those days, grammar school did not mean what it might mean to you today. It meant a place where boys, only boys, studied Latin. They read ancient Roman writers. They memorized long passages of poetry. They were trained to think in structures, in arguments, in beautiful, ordered language. The school day began at 6 in the morning. It lasted until 5 in the evening. 6 days a week, 11 hours of studying, 6 days a week. For most boys, this was simply work to be endured. But for William, something happened in that room. He discovered that words were not just containers for meaning. They were music. They had weight and rhythm and color. A sentence, written the right way, could make your heart beat faster. It could make you feel something you had never felt before. It could make a stranger feel understood. He loved this. He carried it inside him like a small, private flame. But life, as it often does, interrupted. His father began to lose money. The reasons are not entirely clear. Some historians believe John Shakespeare was involved in illegal trading and was fined heavily. Whatever the cause, the family began to struggle, and William, still a teenager, was asked to leave school and help at home. His formal education was over. He was perhaps 15 or 16 years old, and yet, and this is what I want you to hold on to, the learning never stopped. At the age of 18, William Shakespeare married a woman named Anne Hathaway. She was 26 years old, 8 years older than him. In Elizabethan England, this was highly unusual. People noticed, people talked. The marriage happened very quickly, and the reason why has been debated by historians for 400 years. Some believe it was a love match, sudden and passionate. Others believe the circumstances were more complicated. Whatever the truth, William and Anne built a life together. They had a daughter, Susanna, and then, 2 years later, twins, a boy named Hamnet and a girl named Judith. William was now a husband, a father of 3, a young man with a family that depended on him. He was 21 years old. Stratford-upon-Avon was too small for the life he needed to build, but it was also the only world he had ever known. And then, silence. Historians call what comes next the lost years. Between 1585 and 1592, we have almost no record of William Shakespeare's life. 7 years. Gone from the historical record like a page torn from a book. What was he doing? Some scholars believe he became a schoolteacher in the English countryside. Others think he joined a traveling company of actors, moving from town to town, learning the theater from the inside. One old story, passed down for generations in Stratford, claims he got into serious trouble for stealing deer from a wealthy landowner's estate and had to leave town quickly to escape punishment. We do not know. We may never know, but we know what happened when those years ended. Because sometime in his mid-20s, William Shakespeare packed whatever he owned, said goodbye to his wife and his 3 children, and walked away from Stratford-upon-Avon. He walked toward London, 100 miles. On foot, no phone to call home, no way to get back quickly. Just a long road, a pair of worn shoes, and something burning inside him that he could not name and could not ignore. Think about that for a moment. He left everything familiar. He left the river he had grown up beside. He left the narrow streets he knew by heart. He left Anne and Susanna, and little Hamnet and Judith, who were still so young. He left because something in him knew that if he stayed, the words inside him would never find their way out into the world. That decision, made by a young man from a small town who barely finished school, changed the history of the English language forever. Forever. London in the 1590s was a world that would shock you if you could step into it today. The streets were crowded beyond imagination. The air was thick with smoke from thousands of cooking fires, with the smell of animals, of food, of the river. Thames running dark and heavy through the center of the city. Men on horses pushed through crowds of merchants, beggars, children, and street sellers. You could buy meat and silk and spices and stolen goods all on the same block. It was dangerous. The plague, a terrible, fast-moving sickness, appeared without warning and killed thousands of people in weeks. Sometimes entire neighborhoods went silent. Sometimes the theaters had to close for months because too many people were dying to fill the seats. But London was also alive in a way that Stratford-upon-Avon could never be. And in the middle of this beautiful, terrible city, something extraordinary was happening. Theaters were being built. These were not quiet, enclosed buildings the way you might imagine. They were large, round, open to the sky. The stage jutted out into the middle of the audience. Rich people paid for covered seats up above. Poor people, called groundlings, paid a single penny to stand in the yard directly in front of the stage. They stood through rain. They stood through cold. They ate nuts and apples and shouted at the actors. They threw things if they did not like what they were seeing. And on that stage, stories came to life. Not in books, not on a screen, in the air, in the space between a human voice and a stranger's open heart. Shakespeare arrived in this world with nothing. No connections, no money, no famous name. He started at the bottom, helping backstage, running errands, holding the horses of wealthy audience members outside the theater doors. He watched. He listened with everything he had. He studied how actors moved, how they breathed, how they let a single pause carry more emotion than 10 words. And then, quietly, he began to write. His early plays were rough, unpolished. Critics noticed. A well-known writer of the time, a man named Robert Greene, wrote a famous insult directed at Shakespeare. He called him an upstart crow, a newcomer, an outsider, someone who had no right to stand alongside real writers, an upstart. Someone who rises without permission. Shakespeare did not respond. He did not argue or defend himself. He simply kept writing, and something in his writing, something warm, something true, something that felt like real human life on the stage, made audiences lean forward in their seats. They wanted more. And Shakespeare, year after year, gave them more. If you are enjoying this story, if the slow pace of this narration is helping your English grow, I warmly invite you to subscribe to Woven English. Every week, we travel through history and ideas together, one story at a time. And now, let us continue. In the years that followed, Shakespeare produced work that the world had never seen before. Think about Romeo and Juliet, two young people from families that have hated each other for generations. They meet at a party. They fall in love in an instant. The kind of love that seems impossible and obvious at the same time. And then the world around them refuses to let them live. The play ends in tragedy. Both of them die. But here is the thing. Shakespeare was not interested in death. He was interested in love, in how love arrives without warning, without asking permission, in how two people can find each other in the middle of a world full of reasons to stay apart. Romeo and Juliet was first performed around 1595. It has been performed somewhere in the world every single day since then. And if you have ever loved someone you were not supposed to love, if you have ever felt that a feeling was too big for the world you were living in, then you already understand exactly what Shakespeare was writing about. Think about Hamlet. A young prince discovers that his uncle murdered his father and took his throne. He must decide. Does he take revenge? Does he confront the truth? Or does he walk away and pretend he does not know? At the center of this story is one of the most famous lines ever written in the English language. To be or not to be, that is the question. In those 9 words, Shakespeare captured something that every human being has felt at some point in their life. The question of whether to keep going. Whether the effort of living is worth the weight of the pain. This is not a question from the 1600s. This is a question from every century, from every country, from every person who has ever sat alone in a quiet room and wondered what to do next. And this is Shakespeare's real gift. He did not write about kings and queens because he was interested in power. He wrote about them because kings and queens felt the same things everyone feels: fear, doubt, love, loneliness, jealousy, pride. He understood that the human heart does not change. It did not change in 1600. It has not changed today. But beyond the stories themselves, Shakespeare did something even more extraordinary. Something that touches your life directly. Right now, today, as you listen to these words, he built new language. Before Shakespeare, the English language did not have the word lonely. People felt loneliness, of course. They carried it inside them, but there was no single, clean, exact word to name it. Shakespeare gave us that word. He also gave us generous. He gave us bedroom. Before that, people said bedchamber. He gave us eyeball, fashionable, uncomfortable, manager, critic, majestic, and excitement. He gave us the phrases break the ice, heart of gold, wild goose chase, green-eyed monster, and all that glitters is not gold. Over 1,700 words, hundreds of phrases. How did he do it? He played with language the way a child plays with clay, pressing it, stretching it, reshaping it into something new. He turned nouns into verbs. He combined words that had never been placed next to each other before. He bent the rules of language because the rules were simply not large enough to hold everything he wanted to say. The English language before Shakespeare was a small house with a few rooms. After Shakespeare, it had wings. But no life, no matter how brilliant, is made only of light. In 1596, Shakespeare received news from Stratford-upon-Avon. His son, Hamnet, had died. He was 11 years old. We do not know exactly what illness took him. In those years, the plague moved through England like a dark wind. Other diseases came without names. Whatever it was, it came quickly, and it took the only son Shakespeare had. Think about what that means for a moment. Shakespeare was in London. He was working. He was writing plays that thousands of people came to see. He was becoming famous. And then a messenger arrived, and nothing was the same. He went back to Stratford to bury his boy, and then, because life continues, even when it feels impossible, he went back to London and kept writing. Some scholars look at his later plays and believe they can hear Hamnet's death in the language. In King John, a mother cries out over the loss of her child in words so raw, so broken, so honest, that readers have always felt there was something personal behind them. Something that came not from imagination, but from memory. There is no proof. We cannot know for certain. But there is a kind of truth in art that does not need proof. You can feel it. You can hear it in the rhythm of the words. The way a sentence that carries grief moves differently from one that does not. Shakespeare also had years when the theaters were simply closed. When the plague was severe enough that the city shut down public gatherings to stop the spread of disease, he could not perform, could not earn money from the stage. During those periods, he turned to writing poetry. His 154 sonnets, short poems of exactly 14 lines, were written during these quieter, harder years. They are some of the most beautiful poems in the English language. They are about time, and love, and beauty, and the painful, impossible knowledge that everything we love will eventually fade away. But even in those poems, there is a stubborn hope, as if he was saying, the world will forget many things. But not these words. These words will stay. And he was right. By around 1613, Shakespeare had largely stopped writing. He was nearly 50 years old. He had spent more than 2 decades in London. He had written at least 37 plays. He had become wealthy enough to buy New Place, the second largest house in all of Stratford-upon-Avon. Think about that. The boy who had left this small town with nothing but a dream and a pair of shoes. He came back as one of its most prosperous citizens. He came back with a name that everyone in England knew. And yet, if you could have watched him in those final years, I think you would have seen something quieter than fame. Something more private. He spent time with his daughters. He walked along the River Avon, the same river he had walked beside as a child. He tended his garden. He sat with neighbors and talked about the ordinary things, the weather, the harvest, the price of grain. Perhaps in those quiet moments, he thought back over everything. The long road to London, the cold early years of begging for work at theater doors. The first time an audience laughed at something he had written, really laughed with their whole bodies. The first time he watched a woman in the crowd cry at words he had put into an actor's mouth. The morning he heard about Hamnet. Perhaps he thought about all of it, sitting there beside the river. Not with sadness, exactly, but with the particular kind of peace that comes when you know you have done the thing you were meant to do. In April of 1616, William Shakespeare died. He was 52 years old. He was buried in Holy Trinity Church in Stratford-upon-Avon, the same church where he had been baptized 52 years earlier. A full circle. On his grave, there is an inscription. A warning, some believe, written by Shakespeare himself. Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Even in death, still writing. Still choosing exactly the right words. 7 years later, in 1623, 2 of his friends and fellow actors collected his plays and published them in a single volume. We call it the First Folio. Without that book, we would have lost half of Shakespeare's work forever. 18 of his plays existed only in performance, never written down for the public. They would have disappeared like breath, disappearing into cold air. But they did not disappear. They survived. and the world they survived into has never been the same. So, what does Shakespeare's life teach us? It teaches us that greatness does not always arrive with a warning. It does not always come with the right education, the right family name, the right connections. It does not always announce itself clearly. Shakespeare was born in a small town. He left school as a teenager. He arrived in London as nobody, a young man from the countryside with worn shoes and a head full of stories that no one had asked for. And yet, he teaches us that the human heart is the same in every century. The jealousy that destroys Othello. You have seen that jealousy, maybe in someone you know, maybe in yourself. The ambition that twists Macbeth into someone unrecognizable. You have watched ambition do that to people. The grief of King Lear losing everything he thought was permanent. That kind of loss is not historical. It is happening somewhere right now. Shakespeare did not write about the past. He wrote about the permanent parts of being human. The parts that do not change with time, with technology, with borders, with languages, and perhaps most quietly, most powerfully, he teaches us that words matter, not just the big, famous, decorated words, all words, the careful choosing of exactly the right one. The decision to say lonely instead of alone without company. The decision to say eyeball instead of something longer and colder. The decision to find the short, warm, exact word for a feeling that everyone recognizes and no one has named yet. Words are how we reach across the space between two people. Words are how we say, I was here. I felt this. You are not the only one. Shakespeare understood this better than anyone who has ever lived. And 400 years after he closed his eyes for the last time, his words are still reaching, still crossing the distance, still saying, you are not the only one. Now I want to speak to you for a moment, not about Shakespeare, about you. You are here, right now, listening to a story told in a language that is not your first language. You are doing something that many people never attempt. You are reaching across a border made not of water or stone, but of sound and meaning and habit and history. And that is not a small thing. Learning a new language is one of the most patient, persistent, quietly brave things a human being can do. Some days it moves slowly. Some days you listen to something 3 times and still feel like the words are slipping past you. Some days you wonder if you are making progress at all. But here is what I want you to know. Every word you understand today is a word you did not understand before. Every sentence you follow is a door opening. Just a little further, just a little more light coming through. Every story you stay with from beginning to end is you building something. Something real. Something that belongs to you now and cannot be taken away. Shakespeare himself was once a boy who had to leave school too early, who arrived in a new and overwhelming city with no guarantee of success. He did not know. His plays would survive 400 years. He did not know his words would travel into languages he had never heard of, into countries that did not yet exist. He just kept writing, and you just keep listening. That is enough. That is more than enough. If this story touched you, I would love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, which part of Shakespeare's life stayed with you the most? Was it the image of a young man walking 100 miles on foot toward a city where no one was waiting for him? Was it the moment he lost his son Hamnet and then went back to writing anyway? Or was it the quiet truth that words he invented in the 1590s are still sitting inside your vocabulary today without you ever knowing they were his? Leave your answer below. I read every single comment, and I would love to know which moment stayed with you. If you are not yet part of the Woven English community, I warmly invite you to subscribe. Every week, we slow down together. We travel through history, through ideas, through language, one careful story at a time. You are not learning alone. We are doing this together. Until next time, take care of yourself, stay curious, and enjoy the beautiful, patient journey of learning. See you in the next story.